What if everything you've been told about closure, about making them understand, about showing them your worth, was wrong? What if the most powerful thing you could ever say was nothing at all? The idea that we need to explain ourselves, that we need to fight for validation after someone walks away, is a lie dressed up as romance. We're conditioned to chase, to react, to show that we still care, thinking maybe, just maybe, they'll turn around. But here's the hard truth. Chasing doesn't show strength. It shows need. And in Stoic relationships, need is the one thing that always destroys respect. So let's flip the script. Let's talk about power. Not the loud, aggressive kind, but the silent, unshakable force of a person who walks away and never looks back. Because here's what they won't tell you. When you finally stop responding, when your energy is no longer available, when your presence disappears completely, that's when it hits them. Not when you begged, not when you explained, not when you left a door open, but when you truly vanish, when you elevate so far that you're unreachable. That's the moment they realize they've lost you, and it crushes them. Not because you made a scene, but because you didn't. Not because you needed to prove your worth, but because your silence made them question theirs. This isn't just about heartbreak. This is about stoicism, about mastering yourself in the aftermath. It's about becoming the person who doesn't react, doesn't chase, doesn't need anyone to understand in order to move forward. That's what real strength looks like. And in this video, you're going to see exactly what happens when they realize you're not coming back. The psychological shifts, the silence that echoes louder than words, the regret that creeps in too late, the transformation you make not for them, but for yourself, and how, by the end, you'll be so far ahead, they won't even be able to recognize the man they once thought they could walk away from. Stay with me, because the deeper we go, the more you'll realize this isn't about revenge. It's not even about them. It's about who you become in their absence. And trust me, you're going to want to hear the ending. This is where Stoic relationships reveal their real power. Let's begin. 1. The illusion of control. They always think you'll come back. That's the first illusion. It's subtle at first, harmless even, a certain confidence, a silent calculation in their posture that says, he'll reach out. They don't always say it aloud, but the assumption is baked into their behavior. Why? Because in their experience, people return. Emotions get the better of them. Pride bends, the silence breaks, and suddenly the one who was left behind is the one doing the chasing. This isn't arrogance, it's conditioning. Many people are used to holding the emotional leverage, especially when they walk away first. The belief that you'll fold, that you'll need to say your piece, that you'll be unable to resist the temptation of just one more message. This is the illusion they rest in. And most of the time, they're right. Most people do come back. Most people crack under the weight of being misunderstood or under the pain of being ignored. But what happens when you don't? What happens when, instead of pleading, you go silent? What happens when the final conversation is already behind you and you're simply gone? Not as a tactic, but as a reflection of who you've become. That's where the illusion starts to fracture. At first, they brush it off. They tell themselves you're playing a game, that this is just your ego reacting. They might even say it to their friends with a smirk. He's being dramatic, he'll be back. And maybe deep down they even hope for it, because if you come back, it means they were right. It means they were worthy of being chased. It means the control they thought they had was real, but you don't. Days pass, then a week, then 2. And with each silent moment, something shifts. Not in you, you've already made your decision, but in them. The silence that once reassured them now starts to whisper doubts. Why hasn't he reached out, they think, not out of longing but out of confusion. It doesn't make sense. You were supposed to fight for this. You were supposed to show in them what they meant. And your refusal to do so, your complete emotional detachment, forces them into unfamiliar territory. They no longer control the narrative. You do, but not by force, by choice. And that choice echoes louder than anything you could have said. Think about it. When someone expects a reaction and receives nothing, what fills that space? Their own thoughts, their own projections, their own insecurities. They start retracing their steps, wondering if maybe they read you wrong. Was he really that into me? Was I wrong about the way he felt? Did I overestimate my place in his life? These aren't questions that come from confidence. They come from fear, and fear feeds the illusion until it collapses under its own weight. That's the moment when silence becomes your sharpest weapon, not used to harm, but to reveal. Because in Stoic relationships, power is never in domination. It's in discipline, it's in self-restraint, it's in choosing peace over explanation. You didn't disappear to manipulate. You didn't stay silent to prove anything. You simply recognized that your energy was being wasted and you reclaimed it. That's it. No drama, no confrontation. Just the quiet dignity of someone who knows their worth. And that, ironically, is what starts to eat at them, because now they see the contrast. Where they once saw someone emotionally available, always ready to give more, they now see a void. And human beings hate a void. We don't know how to process absence. We try to fill it, define it, label it, but when someone walks away with peace and leaves no crack in the door, we're left with only one thing, our own reflection, and that is exactly what begins to haunt them. Your absence becomes a mirror. They're forced to confront what they never saw before. Your strength, your detachment, your willingness to walk without making noise. That's not common. That's not weak. That's terrifying. Because now the illusion that they had the upper hand fades. And what remains? The truth, they never had control to begin with. They only had access. Access to your emotions, your attention, your presence. And now that it's gone, they realize access was always a privilege, not a right. And once that privilege is revoked, there's no negotiation, there's no reapplication, there's no refund. This is where Stoicism teaches its first and most painful lesson. Letting go is not a tactic, it's a truth. And those who operate from illusion cannot understand the weight of that truth until they've lost it. So you keep walking. You don't need to explain the decision. You don't need them to understand it. That's not your burden anymore. Your only task is to live in alignment with what you know, that your value isn't determined by how loudly you speak when leaving, but by how clearly your absence communicates when you don't return. This is the crumbling of the illusion, the moment they first sense they misjudged you, and it's only the beginning. 2. The void grows. At first, the silence doesn't bother them. It feels empowering. They walk away, convinced they made the right decision, maybe even proud of themselves. There's a sense of liberation, like shedding a weight they no longer wanted to carry. You're not texting, you're not calling, you're not reacting to their stories. And in the beginning, they interpret that as confirmation. You must be hurting, sulking, watching from the shadows, quietly waiting for the moment to reach out. That's what people usually do. That's what they've seen before. So your silence? It's just part of the game in their mind. But here's where it begins to shift. Games require players, and when they realize you're not playing, the thrill starts to fade. The attention they once craved from you becomes suspicious in its absence. Why hasn't he checked in? They begin to ask themselves, but quietly, even subconsciously. They scroll through their phone more often, checking notifications, not looking for something in particular, just something. Something from you. A sign, a reaction, anything. But there's nothing. No message, no accidental like, no presence. You're not there, not online, not lurking, not visible. And that's when discomfort begins to creep in, not as panic, but as stillness. The kind of stillness that makes you realize something important has gone missing. See, people don't panic when you first go silent. They panic when the silence doesn't end, and the longer it lasts, the heavier it becomes. Because silence isn't just a lack of noise, it's a presence all its own. It expands, it fills rooms, it gets inside their head at night. It grows in those in-between moments, when they're alone, when they're scrolling through social media, when a song comes on that reminds them of something they didn't think mattered anymore. And the worst part, the mind abhors a vacuum. When something disappears from someone's life, especially something they once had easy access to, the brain starts trying to fill the space. It starts asking questions. It builds scenarios. Is he over me? Was I just a phase? Is he with someone else? Does he even care at all? And those questions don't come during the chaos of life. They arrive during the silence, at night, during quiet drives, in the moments where nothing distracts. That's when the void starts whispering. That's when your absence stops being neutral and starts being meaningful, because now you're not just gone, you're gone. Not bitter, not angry, not dramatic, just vanished, peacefully, purposefully, with no trace. And that absence, it hits different, especially for someone who expected control, for someone who thought they could walk away without consequence. This isn't just about emotional distance, it's about the kind of withdrawal that leaves nothing to hold on to. You didn't fight, you didn't beg, you didn't explain, and that restraint, your stoicism, is what starts the mental unraveling. Because if you didn't react, what does that say about how much you cared? If you can live without them so cleanly, were they ever that important? These are not easy questions to sit with, and here's the twist. They won't admit they're thinking about you, not to their friends, not even to themselves at first. They'll post stories, go out, keep themselves distracted. But when the noise dies down, when the phone battery is low and the people go home, your absence creeps back in like smoke under the door. And it lingers. It doesn't shout. It whispers. Because here's the truth no one wants to face. When someone who once gave you access no longer does, it's not just silence, it's a boundary. And boundaries, when real, aren't enforced with ultimatums or threats. They're enforced with distance. And that distance starts to define your value. Not in their eyes at first, but in their mind. You become untouchable, unreachable, and the human mind starts to obsess over what it can't touch. That's how the void grows. It doesn't explode, it expands, quietly, slowly. With every day you don't check in, with every story you don't watch, with every weekend that goes by without a text, you become less of a person in their life, and more of a presence in their thoughts. And the strange irony, you're not doing anything. That's the part that hits hardest. You're not manipulating. You're not trying to make them jealous. You're just gone, focused, forward-facing. And that self-control, that refusal to re-enter their orbit is what deepens the void. Because if someone can walk away and never look back, what does that say about what they left? About who you were to that person? In Stoic relationships, this is the pivot point where emotional detachment becomes transformation. It's where silence becomes strength, where discipline becomes dominance, not over them, but over yourself. You've chosen not to fill the space they created, and that decision haunts them more than any message ever could. They start to imagine you moving on. They picture you with someone else. They analyze your old photos, your old conversations, looking for missed signs. They wonder, did he know before I did? Was he ready to leave even when I thought I was in control? And that uncertainty, it stings, because people can handle rejection, but indifference, that's harder. It feels cold, final, and yet it's not fueled by hate, it's fueled by peace. That's what makes it so devastating. You're not hurting, you're healing, you're not plotting, you're progressing. And in that clarity, they start to see the truth. You were not an option. You were a blessing, a presence they misread, a value they misjudged. And now, the window has closed. Not because you slammed it shut, but because you outgrew the room. That's the void. And the longer it lingers, the louder it speaks, not with words, but with the weight of what's missing. And here's where most people fail. They break the silence. They check in. They fall back into old loops, craving connection. And in doing so, they give up the power that silence gave them. But not you. You've come too far. You've felt the shift. You've seen how stoicism holds its ground, not by force, but by freedom. And if you've felt even a glimpse of this in your own life, if the void has ever grown in someone else's mind because of your quiet, steady exit, like this video and comment number 1 if you're feeling this message right now. Your journey matters. Your silence matters. And if you want more wisdom on mastering your presence and your power in Stoic relationships, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for what's coming next. 3. The glow-up. You evolve in silence. They didn't see it coming because they weren't looking. When they left, they assumed you'd stay in the same emotional place, that you'd pause your life, your growth, your progress, waiting for their return, or at least for the closure. They believed you couldn't live without. But instead, you did something rare, something powerful. You turned inward. You went quiet. Not just externally, but internally. You took the pain, the confusion, the rejection, and instead of broadcasting it, you used it, you fed it into something greater, not a facade, not a social media show, but real silent evolution. You didn't post about your process. You didn't chase attention. You chased nothing. You just started becoming, day by day, step by step. You showed up for yourself when they didn't. You hit the gym not for validation, but to reclaim your discipline. You started reading, not to appear smarter, but to understand more. You focused on your finances, your craft, your space, not as distractions, but as foundations. The pain didn't disappear, but it was repurposed, transmuted. You didn't numb it, you harnessed it. And that's the part they can't understand, because most people expect others to fall apart after being left behind. That's the typical narrative. Cry, sulk, wait, post quotes, send late-night texts. But you vanished with intention. You didn't suppress your emotions. You studied them. You didn't escape your loneliness. You befriended it. You trained your mind to sit still in silence, to breathe through it, to listen to it, to let it shape you. And in doing so, you stepped into the essence of stoicism, not cold detachment, but controlled evolution. You didn't run. You rooted. You didn't spiral. You structured. While they were out seeking distraction, attention, affirmation, you were busy building. And then, something changed. Your energy, your posture, your presence. Maybe it wasn't visible to them yet, but it was happening. The glow-up wasn't just physical, it was internal. A quiet confidence began to replace your old wounds. You stopped explaining yourself, not because you were hiding, but because you no longer needed to be understood by someone who didn't value your clarity in the first place. That's what growth looks like. Not loud, not public, but undeniable. And the world began to notice subtle shifts, comments from people close to you, new respect from peers, the return of your spark, not because of them, but in spite of them. That's when the transformation starts leaking out through the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you no longer seek approval. It's in your schedule, your decisions, your priorities. You wake up earlier, you sleep deeper, you say no more easily, you spend more time alone, not because you're isolated, but because solitude now feels sacred. And eventually, they do see it. Not because you showed it to them, not because you made a statement, but because the contrast between who you were when they left and who you've become is impossible to ignore. Maybe it's a mutual friend posting a photo. Maybe it's a shared event. Maybe they searched your name just out of curiosity. And what they see, it shakes them. Because you don't just look better, you are better. There's something in your eyes, a calmness, a certainty, a lack of need. That version of you, the one who used to chase, overthink, worry about what they felt, is gone. In his place stands someone they don't recognize. And that unfamiliarity, it doesn't attract them at first. It unsettles them, because it forces them to confront a truth they never considered. Maybe you weren't the weak one. Maybe you were just misused, misunderstood. Maybe they never really knew you at all. That's where the regret starts. Not in your progress, but in their misjudgment. They thought they were leaving someone they outgrew. But what they really did was give space to someone who had only just begun. Your glow-up isn't revenge. It's revelation. It reveals what they couldn't see while they had access to you, your capacity, your depth, your potential. And the cruel irony? They helped unlock it. By walking away, by dismissing you, they lit a fire they now wish they hadn't. Because you used that fire, not to burn down the past, but to build a new future. And now you live there. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you're no longer the version of yourself that needed proving. That's the glow up. And it's not for them, it never was. It's for you, for the life you're now creating, for the relationships you'll now attract, for the peace you'll now protect. And the further you go, the more unreachable you become. Not in a cruel way, but in a focused, disciplined, evolved way. Because true power isn't in making them miss you, it's in becoming so valuable, so centered, so intentional, that their memory fades into irrelevance, not because you erased it, but because you've outgrown the chapter where they were necessary. In Stoic relationships, this is where the tide turns, not with vengeance, not with bitterness, but with growth. Pure, undeniable, irrefutable self-growth. It speaks louder than any quote. It humbles louder than any comeback. And when they finally realize the full extent of who you've become, they'll know the truth. They didn't leave the person they thought you were. They left the person you were becoming. And now, they no longer have access. Because the man who glowed up in silence is no longer the man who waits. 4. The subtle reach out. It doesn't happen all at once. It begins as a whisper, a tap on the shoulder of your digital presence. Not loud, not desperate, just subtle. A like on a photo from months ago. A story view that feels too intentional to be random. A follow request. Maybe even a short message. Hey. Simple, no context, sent at 2 a.m., then deleted. These aren't acts of connection, they're acts of curiosity wrapped in denial. It's their way of asking, are you still there? Do I still have access? Do I still matter? But they won't say that out loud. Pride won't let them. Because admitting that your absence created a void in their world would require acknowledging that they misjudged you. And that admission, whether verbalized or felt, is heavy. So instead, they reach out without reaching out. They test the water. They send signals disguised as mistakes. They don't want to re-enter your life, not really. They want to know if the door is still open, if the version of you they once walked away from is still lingering in the background, hoping, waiting, holding space. But what they find instead is silence. No reaction, no comment, no response, just stillness. And that stillness, it doesn't reassure them, it rattles them, because now the question changes. It's no longer, can I still reach him? It becomes, why doesn't he react? That's when fear begins to creep in. Not fear of rejection, but fear of irrelevance. Because if someone once gave you all their energy, all their focus, and now treats you like you're invisible, what does that say about the power you thought you had? This is the quiet reversal of roles. And it's brutal. Because in Stoic relationships, emotional availability is a privilege, not a default. And once that privilege is revoked, there's no announcement, there's no final warning. There's just a shift. And that shift is what they're trying to undo with their reach-outs. But the truth is, they're not reaching for you. They're reaching for who you used to be. For the emotional version of you that was always there, that checked in, that cared too much, that needed their validation to feel seen. But that version of you? He's gone, replaced by someone who no longer assigns value based on proximity, replaced by someone who doesn't respond to breadcrumbs, who doesn't chase ghosts. And that silence, it burns, because it says more than words ever could. It says, you don't have access to me anymore. Not because you hate them, not because you're angry, but because you've outgrown the part of you that needed to be accessible. And when someone realizes they're no longer relevant to the person they thought they'd always have influence over, that realization hurts in a way few things do. But still, they try. Another message, a question about something meaningless, a comment on something they never cared about before. This time, maybe with more warmth, more nostalgia, like nothing happened, as if the silence didn't exist, as if they didn't vanish when you were still there. But you don't bite, because you see the game, you understand the pattern. They're not reaching out from a place of love. They're reaching out from a place of uncertainty. And you, having learned from the silence, from the stillness, from your glow-up, are no longer a player in that game. You're not cold, you're composed. You're not ignoring them to hurt them. You're ignoring them to protect your growth. And here's what they don't expect: for you to be unaffected, for you to be unmoved, for you to treat their presence now like they treated yours before. Disposable. This isn't vengeance, it's balance, the natural consequence of how energy works. What you give without reciprocation eventually withers, and now they're trying to water a garden they let die long ago. But it's too late, because the soil has changed. You've changed, and this is where stoicism becomes the anchor. You don't react because you no longer need to. You've transcended the version of yourself that needed closure, that needed recognition, that needed to be seen by someone who once looked right through you. Now, your validation comes from purpose, from peace, from presence, and their attempts to reclaim space in your life only highlight what they lost. Because access isn't granted through sentiment, it's earned through alignment, and they're no longer aligned with who you are. Maybe they never were. So they keep testing, keep reaching, and with every unanswered message, every silent rejection, the reality becomes clearer. You're not avoiding them, you're indifferent to them, and that indifference, that emotional neutrality, is what devastates them the most, because it tells the truth they didn't want to believe. They no longer affect you. You've moved beyond, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And they're stuck in the echo of their own regret. They replay old moments, not because they love you, but because they can't stand the idea of losing their grip. But the grip is already gone. You took your energy back. You reclaimed your value. And now you're living in a space where they simply don't fit anymore. Not because they're bad people, but because they represent an old version of you, one you're not returning to. This is the power of silence, the power of restraint, the power of letting the past knock while you refuse to answer. Because the man you are now doesn't live at that address. And if this part of the journey resonates with you, if you felt the reach-outs, the subtle attempts, the quiet tests of your growth, like this video and comment number 1 if you're feeling this message right now. Your silence is not weakness, it's wisdom. And if you want to stay grounded in that strength, subscribe now and stay tuned for what's coming. There's more to uncover, more to master, and more to become in this journey through Stoic relationships. 5. The weight of finality. It's not the message itself that breaks them, it's the space after. The part where nothing follows, no reply, no follow-up, no continuation, just finality. See, most people are used to endings that still leave something open, a door ajar, A text that invites more questions, a dramatic pause, waiting for a second act. But when they get a clean goodbye, something like, "I respect your decision, take care," and then silence. It rattles them, because that kind of exit isn't common. It's not emotionally explosive. It doesn't feed into their expectation of drama. It doesn't allow them to play victim or rescuer. It just ends, with poise, with precision. And that weight, the weight of something truly over, is what begins to unravel their sense of control. They thought you'd plead. They thought you'd send one last paragraph, overflowing with emotion and confusion, something that would allow them to feel secure in your vulnerability. But instead, you sent closure, not as a plea, as a decision. That's when the power dynamic flips, because they can't respond to that kind of finality. Not honestly, not without revealing what they didn't expect to feel. Regret. Your last message, short and composed, doesn't give them anything to latch onto. It doesn't ask questions. It doesn't leave the window open. It's just done. And that's what begins to haunt them. The idea that maybe they didn't matter as much as they believed. That maybe you weren't trying to win them back. That maybe, just maybe, you meant it when you let them go. It plants a seed of doubt. And doubt, once it starts growing, becomes a forest. Every hour that passes without a text from you, a day that your name doesn't pop up, becomes evidence of a new narrative, one they never considered. You're not coming back. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you've genuinely accepted what is. That's rare. Most people talk about moving on, but secretly hope for a return. They unfollow, but check the stories. They say they're done, but send songs, quotes, memories. You did what few ever do. You gave no room for the past to breathe in your future. And that kind of discipline, that clarity, it scares them, because it makes them realize they never really had the emotional upper hand. They had your presence, but now they have only the memory of it. And the more they sit with that memory, the heavier it becomes, because it's not just a memory of what was, it's a reminder of what will never be again. That's what finality is. It's not cruelty. It's not coldness. It's the end of emotional access, and people don't handle that well, because closure, when real, doesn't give them anything to reopen. And without something to reopen, they're left with silence, with self-reflection, with the consequences of choices made without understanding the cost. They reread your final message, hoping for a hidden meaning. They analyze the tone, the timing, the wording. They wonder if you'll follow up. But you won't, because Stoicism teaches that closure isn't something you wait for, it's something you create. And once created, you don't revisit it. You don't reopen wounds for the sake of validation. You don't look back, hoping they'll finally understand. Because understanding is not your responsibility anymore. Growth is. So you stay silent, not out of spite, but out of truth. The truth that the door has closed and you've already walked through it. And that calm exit? It echoes louder than any speech. It speaks not only to your self-control, but to your self-respect. You didn't need to prove anything. You didn't need to dramatize your departure. You simply left. And the simplicity, that clean, sharp line, that's what cuts deepest, because it offers no comfort, no loophole, no sense of emotional leverage, just reality. And reality, when it arrives uninvited, is often brutal, especially for someone who expected to be chased. They begin to question everything. Was I not worth more effort? Was I misreading his feelings the entire time? Did I push away someone irreplaceable? And you don't answer. Because the journey you're on no longer includes them. And that's what makes the ending so powerful. You didn't close the chapter, you closed the book. And when someone realizes that they've been written out, not with bitterness, but with peace. It forces them to confront a very painful truth. Their role is over. That's the weight of finality. Not that it ends, but that it ends without permission, without mutual agreement, without emotional resolution, just ends. And that's where they sit now, with an inbox that stays empty, with memories that don't bring comfort, with an ego that no longer feels superior, because in your silence, in your lack of reaction, in your refusal to entertain the past, you've said everything, and that kind of message can't be argued with. It can't be debated. It can't be softened. It can only be accepted eventually, slowly, painfully, and that's when the shift happens. When they finally realize you're not waiting, that this wasn't a strategy, that your last message wasn't a cliffhanger, it was the credits rolling, and now they're left in the darkened theater, wondering when the sequel starts, only to realize it doesn't, because in Stoic relationships there is no sequel. There's only growth, there's only forward, there's only what's next. You mastered your emotions, you accepted what you couldn't control, and you moved with such quiet conviction that the loudest sound left behind was the sound of the door closing. That's the weight of finality. Not anger, not resentment, just the undeniable truth. You've left and you're not coming back. 6. The moment of regret. It always comes later than they expect. At first, they convince themselves they've made the right choice. They tell themselves you are just another chapter, a phase, something they needed to experience to grow. They move forward in appearance, keeping up the illusion of control, of freedom, of peace. But beneath that curated exterior, something else begins to stir. It starts subtly. Their eyes linger a little longer when they scroll past an old picture of you. A shared memory flashes. Uninvited, a moment you once shared resurfaces at the most unexpected time. Still, they push it down. They aren't ready to feel the full weight yet. They aren't ready to admit that maybe, just maybe, they didn't leave someone average. They left someone exceptional, someone they didn't fully understand until you were no longer available. See, regret doesn't come from the loss itself. It comes from realizing what you lost was irreplaceable. And that's where the spiral begins. They see you thriving. They see the glow up. They see the new energy in your eyes, the posture of someone who no longer carries the emotional burden they once dropped on your shoulders. They try to convince themselves you're pretending, that it's a mask, that deep down you still miss them. But the more they look, the less they recognize you. You're no longer wounded. You're not angry. You're not lingering. You're free. And that freedom, that's when it hits them, because they thought you'd wait. They thought time would soften you, that after the silence, you'd come back with open arms, with that same old look in your eyes, the one that said they still had you. But when they see that look is gone, replaced with confidence, presence, purpose, they realize the truth. They lost you. Not just physically, not just emotionally. They lost access, they lost connection, they lost the right to be close to someone who turned their pain into peace. This isn't about jealousy. This isn't even about missing you. It's about realizing that they had something rare and they let it go. And now they watch from a distance, maybe through social media, maybe through mutual friends, maybe just through their own imagination. But every version of you they see now is stronger than the last. And that strength doesn't make them proud. It makes them panic. Because if you've moved on this much without them, were they ever as important as they thought? That question isn't just rhetorical, it's haunting. It circles them late at night in quiet moments when they pick up their phone and instinctively think of texting you, only to realize they don't even know who you are anymore. You've become unreachable, not because you're hiding, but because you've evolved. You no longer need their presence. You no longer need to be understood by someone who couldn't see you clearly when you were right in front of them. That's what regret is. The slow burn of realizing that the door is no longer locked. It's gone. And even if they came back, Even if they apologized, even if they tried to start over, something inside them knows it wouldn't work, because the person they miss is no longer there. The version of you they knew no longer exists. And now, every moment of silence, every image of you flourishing becomes a mirror that reflects their own misunderstanding, their own impatience, their own inability to recognize depth in real time. And that realization, it doesn't just sting, it scars, because now they live with what-ifs. What if I had stayed? What if I had listened? What if I had chosen differently? And the worst part, you don't even think about them anymore, not in bitterness, not in longing, but in complete neutrality. You've accepted what is. You've integrated the lesson. And in Stoic relationships, that's the final evolution. Not just moving on, but moving up. You've built something greater, not to show them, not to get a reaction, but because you realized your purpose was never meant to be proven to them. It was meant to be lived, fully with or without their understanding. And now, as they sit in the aftermath of their decision, they're finally feeling what you once did. But there's a difference. You transformed your pain. They're now drowning in theirs. Because the moment of regret isn't just emotional, it's existential. It challenges who they believed they were and what they thought they had control over. And when they realize you were the prize, when they see you've replaced the space they left with something higher, something purer, something more aligned, they no longer feel powerful. They feel forgotten, replaced, obsolete. That's the moment of regret. And it's not loud, it's not explosive, it's quiet, it lingers. It whispers truths they never wanted to hear. And while they're spiraling, you're simply living, breathing, creating. You've built a life that no longer includes them, and that exclusion is more painful than any words you could have spoken. You didn't need revenge, you needed distance, and from that distance came clarity. From that clarity came peace, and from peace came transformation. This is the moment they realize what they gave up, and that it's never coming back. If this reflection spoke to you, if you felt the shift, the clarity, the rising tide of your own journey, like this video and comment number 1 if you're living your own evolution right now. Subscribe for more grounded truths and powerful insights into Stoic relationships, because the next chapter of your growth deserves even more clarity. 7. The Unreachable Man. There's a moment when it finally hits her, not as a question, not as an emotion, but as an undeniable truth. You're no longer within reach. At first, she resists it. She tries to rationalize. She tells herself this is temporary, that this is a phase, that you'll soften with time, that all it takes is the right message, the right memory, the right tone of vulnerability to bring you back into orbit. And so she tries again. Not out of love, but out of a quiet, creeping desperation that she refuses to admit, even to herself. The desperation doesn't show up as tears. It shows up as strategy. She sends a longer message this time. Something more sincere, more personal, a message layered with nostalgia, hoping to stir something in you. A reminder of the good times, a subtle appeal to the part of you that once saw her as everything. But your response, if it comes at all, is cold, not cruel, but distant, disconnected, neutral. And that's when the final piece drops into place for her. She can no longer reach you because the version of you that once needed her, wanted her, loved her, that man no longer exists. You've changed. Not just in your behavior, but in your being. And that change can't be reversed. She thought she'd always have access, that no matter how far you drifted, she could say the right thing, flip the right emotional switch, and you'd reappear, eager, open, ready to reconnect. But now she sees that door is gone, not closed, gone. You didn't just leave the past, you burned the bridge behind you, not in anger, but in truth. Because the man you are now doesn't look back. He doesn't re-enter old spaces, hoping they've changed. He knows that peace is built, not begged for. And what she mistook for bitterness is actually discipline. What she saw as pride is actually clarity. She's not facing a man who's trying to win. She's facing a man who already has, internally. The unreachable man is not unreachable because he's hiding. He's unreachable because he's transcended the need for access. His emotions are no longer dictated by external validation. His value is no longer tied to another person's attention. He no longer navigates life seeking permission to feel strong. He simply is. And that is what breaks her, not the silence, not the indifference, but the realization that she no longer has influence, that the power she once held through charm, beauty, or familiarity means nothing now. Because your power no longer lives in the external, it lives in your alignment, in your solitude, in your stillness. That's what makes you unreachable. And the irony? You didn't do it to punish her. You did it to protect yourself, to protect your growth, to protect the integrity you now live by. And she sees it in every choice you make, in every post that's not about her, in every story where you're smiling, not as a performance, but from a place she no longer understands. Because that smile, it doesn't need to be seen, it's for you. And that's what she can't touch anymore, your peace. The peace that used to be fragile, dependent on her responses, her moods, her validation. Now, that peace is internal. It's rooted. It's the kind of peace that doesn't beg for attention. It creates distance from anything that threatens it, and now you're just gone. Not physically, but in the way that matters, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You're not playing games. You're living a life where her presence no longer makes sense, where the memory of her is just that, a memory, not a trigger, not a hope, not a longing, just part of the path that led you here. And that here, it's sacred because it was earned through silence, through stillness, through every hard decision you made in the dark. You became the man who doesn't reach back, not because he's bitter, but because he's built something forward-facing, something grounded, something that doesn't leave space for anything that once made him doubt his own worth. She sees it now, in your tone, in your eyes, in the way you speak, not to impress, but to express. You carry yourself differently, not with arrogance, with certainty. And that certainty, it's untouchable. It makes you the man she can no longer touch, not because you've hidden yourself away, but because you've risen, quietly, with dignity, with direction. She thought she could pause you, keep you as a backup, return if the world disappointed her. But what she didn't realize is that you were never an option. You were a moment that passed, a lesson that taught her what it feels like to lose something irreplaceable. And now, all she has left is her own reflection, her own silence, the echo of what she thought she controlled. You didn't take anything from her, she gave it up, willingly. And now, she sees what she gave up, the emotional availability, the loyalty, the presence, the patience. The man who would have gone to war for her heart now walks alone, not in sadness, in purpose. And stoicism lives in every step, because this man, the unreachable man, isn't hardened. He's healed, and healed men don't go back to places that broke them. They don't shrink to fit into spaces they've outgrown. They don't answer doors that life has already closed. She thought time would soften you, but time refined you, strengthened you, made you whole. And that wholeness is what makes you truly unreachable, not in distance but in depth. You no longer need to be found. You've already arrived. This is where the story ends, not with a dramatic reunion, not with an apology that comes too late, but with a man walking forward in silence. Not because he's cold, but because he's complete. The one who never looks back is not the one who won the game. He's the one who outgrew it. He's the one who realized that no closure, no explanation, no final conversation could add value to the peace he's built alone. In Stoic relationships, there is no power in going back to what once made you feel powerless. There's only power in presence, in purpose, in growth, and the truth is, she will remember you. Maybe not every day, maybe not in every moment, but in flashes, in the quiet of the night, in the face of someone who doesn't understand her like you did, in the reflection of a moment she once took for granted, and every time she does, she will feel the loss, not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't, because you didn't need revenge, you didn't need validation, you didn't need to be seen, you just rose, in your own time, on your own path. That's what Stoicism teaches, not to become less human, but to become more whole. To master your emotions so well that you no longer chase storms, you build shelter from them. You don't win by making them regret. You win by making their regret irrelevant to your progress. You win by building a life so full that the past has no room in it. That is your victory. Quiet, unshakable, real. So if this video resonated with you, if you saw yourself in these words and felt that rise inside you, like this video, comment number 1 to let others know you're on this journey too, and subscribe to stay grounded in your evolution. Share this with someone who's been there, someone rising, someone reaching the next version of themselves. Thank you for walking this road with presence and power. Keep rising, keep evolving, and remember, forward is the only direction. The past is done. You are the one who never looks back.